My name is Naomi Pierce, I'm 31, and this is the story of how one Thanksgiving revealed the truth about who had really been paying for my sister's life. If you enjoy real-life stories like mine, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. I was balancing a casserole dish on my forearm and a paper grocery bag with dinner rolls when I stepped onto my parents' front porch in Oak Park. The late afternoon was already dim. Neighbors' bay windows glowed amber behind bare trees. Inside, I could hear the particular chaos of my family. Doors closing, a football game murmuring from the den, my mother's voice rising and falling like she was conducting a very difficult orchestra. I set the rolls down to ring the bell out of habit, even though the door was always unlocked on holidays. My dad opened immediately, cheeks ruddy, sweater too big at the wrists. "There she is," he said, ushering me into the warmth. The dependable one. He meant it kindly. It landed like a label. Coats and scarves hung on a rack that had never held anything without leaning. The house smelled like sage and browned butter and my mother's perfume, the same floral one she's worn since I was a kid. I passed the entry mirror and caught a glimpse of myself. Black turtleneck, neat bun, practical flats. And for a second I saw what everyone else might. Tidy, finished edges, no surprises. It was an efficient image, occupational habit. I'm a budget analyst for the city. My work file folders are color-coded. My spreadsheets have subtabs. I know where every dollar is supposed to go and what happens when it doesn't. "There you are," Mom said from the kitchen, not turning, stirring gravy in a tiny panic. "Put that on the stove, not the counter. The granite feels cold today." She always said things like that, like stone had moods. I set my casserole where she wanted and took in the scene. The kitchen looked like a showroom except for the post-it notes everywhere. Cranberries, 315, based, 405, warm rolls, last, do not forget salt. My mother manages holidays like fire drills. My sister manages them like photo shoots. "Has Tessa texted?" Mom asked, eyes flicking to her phone on the windowsill. Not me. I reached past a tower of plates to steal a carrot from the crudité tray and she slapped my hand with the spatula. "A reflex since 1998. She said she's bringing a tart from Maison Farine." Mom went on. "The lemon one. She says it's the new thing." I chewed. "New lemon." Mom didn't smile. "Don't start. I wasn't starting anything. I was trying not to think about the thing I had been thinking about for 2 days straight. The little ritual I'd played out in my head over and over until it felt like muscle memory. Logging into my banking app, scrolling to the section with recurring payments, and pressing the button that said cancel. Even thinking the word made my pulse jump. I had not canceled anything yet. I wanted to walk into this house and keep the day normal. I wanted to listen to my dad's chatty recap of the Bears' quarterback woes, and hear my aunts give the same advice about my retirement contributions they always gave. I wanted to leave with Tupperware filled with leftovers, and for the first time in years, not leave with a dull headache that no amount of water could fix. But the universe doesn't schedule revelations like a meeting. They arrive when they're ready. Tessa breezed in 25 minutes late, November wind chasing her scarves. She had that natural spotlight aura, the thing where people turned to look at her without being told. She was 3 years younger, a year-round summer in our family's season of muted tones. She kissed Mom loudly, hugged Dad with one arm while the other lifted the pastry box above her head, and then she turned to me and smiled. "Naomi." She said my name like a greeting and a question at once. "Did you bring your famous casserole?" I brought a casserole. I cleaned my hands on a dish towel and moved to take the box. "You brought sugar," she laughed. I brought a narrative. That was the word she used a lot for her work and her life. Tessa is, or was, depending on who you ask, a freelance event stylist. She plans weddings and pop-up dinners and brand launches, the kind of things that make it to the most photogenic lists. She's good at color palettes and vintage glassware. She's less good at invoices and taxes, which is how I know the shape of her debt better than she ever admitted to anyone else. I knew the 3 credit cards with their urgent red exclamation marks. I knew the small personal loan from a peer-to-peer lending site that came with hopeful emojis at first and curt reminders later. I knew the store cards that tempted with 20% off today only, and then haunted with interest. And I knew all of it because I had been transferring money to keep her head above water for 5 solid years. It had started with a single phone call the year she went full-time on her own. She'd had a client fall through and another who ghosted, and her minimums were due. And could I spot her just this once? Only for 3 months, because she was waiting on a big brand collaboration contract. The contract never arrived. The 3 months turned into a year. The year turned into 5. That night changed everything. I didn't know it then, but that moment would define everything that followed. At the dining table, my mother always bundles too many chairs around. The candles were lit early, for ambiance, which meant we ate in near darkness at 4:30 because daylight disappears here like a trick. The turkey was carved with ceremony. My uncles argued good-naturedly about whether stuffing belonged inside or outside the bird. Outside. I have spreadsheets. And for a while, the conversation was the gentle hum of family rhythms. Tessa was in her element, telling a story about a garden party she had styled last month where it had rained at noon, and we pivoted to this gorgeous tent, and honestly, it was better, I swear. And Mom's eyes glittered like the party had been hers. My cousin Nina leaned around the centerpiece. "Naomi, I saw something about the city budget cuts. That must be stressful." "It's a lot of meetings," I said, "but we'll figure it out." "She always figures it out," Dad cut in, pride tucked under joke. "Our Naomi finds money where there is none." Tessa tapped her glass with her fork, the polite chime of a toast without the toast. "Speaking of money," she said, light as a feather, "can we maybe not do a whole lecture this year about budgeting at the table? It's kind of a buzzkill," I blinked. No one had lectured anyone. I opened my mouth to say exactly that, and she went on, easy smile, eyes sliding to me. "And Naomi," she added, almost playful, "stop asking me for little loans, okay? I love you, but it's awkward." The room contracted. I could feel every knife tip point inward. My fork hovered. A small sound came from the far side, like someone setting a glass down too hard. I stared at my sister, at her soft cashmere sweater, and the bar of gold pinned to it like a quiet badge. It was the kind of thing she'd say in a story to make herself look self-aware. It was not true, but she said it the way she said everything, as if a fact could be made by tone. "I don't ask you for money," I said, calm because the alternative was a tremor. Tessa's smile didn't falter. "Okay," she laughed, like we all knew what I meant. "No." I laid my fork flat, aligned between plate and napkin. "I don't ask you for money." A silence with edges. My mother's eyes flicked between us like she might physically push our words back into our mouths if she could. Dad started an anecdote about a busted sprinkler line at the garden, an emergency rescue attempt. But even he couldn't build a bridge that quickly. Here's where things got complicated. When you spend years protecting someone, you become fluent in a language that doesn't translate. You learn their emergencies and their rhythms, and you rearrange yourself so that their chaos doesn't spill onto the rug. You make their problem a line item in your life. The world sees the calm surface and assumes it was effortless. I didn't cause a scene. I excused myself to refill the water pitcher. In the short dark of the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed like a steady thought. I dried my hands, slid my phone out of my pocket, and opened the banking app that knows things about me even my family doesn't. The list of recurring transfers I had set up was neat on the screen. 2 for credit card minimums, 1 for a high-interest personal loan, 1 for the store card she told me she'd cut up but hadn't, and 1 miscellaneous category she always called bridging, my least favorite euphemism. I tapped each entry and pressed cancel. The app asked me to confirm each time, and for once I liked the way it needed my answer. A small series of green check marks lit like a runway. I returned to the table with a pitcher of water. Not a word said. The game on the den TV punctured the silence. Touchdown, crowd noise, a commentator with a voice like gravel in winter. My body sat back down in my chair. My mind had shifted a degree I could feel in my bones. I didn't taste the food much after that, though I nodded and smiled where the social script demanded it. Later, when the pies came out and the lemon tart was a hit because it looked like something in a magazine, I slipped away to the coat room, a tiny space that still smelled faintly of cedar from the year my dad tried to line it himself and gave up. I texted Tessa 1 simple sentence. I will no longer be covering your debts. She didn't respond, not then. The reply came the next morning at 7:02 a.m. What are you talking about? I turned my phone face down on my kitchen table and let my coffee go cold. At 7:06, Naomi, this isn't funny. The auto payments failed. I got alerts. Did your card get hacked? Fix it. At 7:09, stop ignoring me. This is cruel. At 7:20, Mom said to call her. You're making a scene. By 8:00 a.m., my mother called with the voice she saved for truly serious occasions, as if she were editing newspapers in a war room. What is this? She asked without hello. I turned off the transfers, I said. I'm done. You can't be done, she said, the way someone might say, you can't move the sun. She has payments due this week. So do I. That's not the same. I watched the light on my wall move slowly from the window frame to the plant and back. It is exactly the same, I said. You know how she is, Mom whispered, like the fact of my sister's temperament was a diagnosis we all had to accommodate. You've always been the one who... I know, I said gently, because I remembered that I had been a child too once. I know what I've always been. After we hung up, I cleaned my tiny apartment like I was resetting a stage. I put the forks back in their little slots and folded my dish towels like a compulsive ritual. Outside, the street was quiet in the particular way a city can be quiet when you don't need it to entertain you. My phone continued to buzz across the table like it was trying to crawl away. I turned it off. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is refuse to participate. Monday at work, I was better at my job than I had been in months. The spreadsheets aligned themselves. The calls were crisp. I caught a duplication in a departmental request that saved someone $3,000, and you would have thought I'd solved traffic. My boss nodded in the way that means you've quietly made their day easier. I ate lunch alone on a bench with a coat on because November sunlight is mostly ambition. I thought about the 5 years behind me and what I wanted the next 5 to look like. And I wondered how many hours of my life I had spent waiting for someone else's crisis to end. The first repayment arrived on Wednesday, but not the kind you deposit at a bank. It came from my cousin Alec in the form of a short, blunt text. Heard you finally said no. Proud of you. I sat with that sentence longer than any plea. Proud of you. If you have ever played the role of family fixer, you know how rare that line is. When you are the one who keeps the roof from buckling, people get used to dry floors. They don't always notice the person on the ladder. That afternoon, Tessa showed up at my office. She has always had a sense of occasion, even for confrontations. She wore a pale coat that probably had a name other than coat. Her lipstick was precise. You've lost your mind, she said as soon as we were in a conference room with the kind of acoustic ceiling panels that always make me want to whisper. Do you know what you've done? They're calling me. I'm getting fees. I know, I said. I've been getting them too. For 5 years. That's different, she snapped. How? I thought... She stopped, smoothed the sleeve of her coat, looked at me like I was a form she didn't remember filling out. I thought you understood how things are. I thought you got it. I do get it, I said. That's why I turned them off. Tessa laughed, a small shocked bark. You are so cold. You said at the table that I ask you for little loans. I said evenly. You know that's not true. She flinched barely like an eyelash fell. It was a joke, she muttered. Everyone knew. I didn't. She crossed her arms, eyes shining with the kind of tears that used to be my emergency alarm. You don't even need the money like I do. I let that one float. I thought about my rent, my student loans, the fact that I hadn't replaced my couch in 10 years because the spring still functioned, and the thought of a new one made me feel greedy. I thought about the number in my head, 52,800, like a stone I had been carrying in my pocket so long I didn't feel its weight until I set it down. I need my life back, I said. Her face hardened like it had been poured and set. I will never forget this, she said, and left as if she were exiting a stage, which in a way she was. Some people don't realize the audience can stop clapping. I expected the family group chat to explode. It did. I expected my mother to call daily. She did. I expected my father to say less than he felt. He did. What I didn't expect was my brother-in-law Logan to text me that Friday. He's quieter than our family requires. A software engineer who often looks like he's been dropped into our living room from a calm planet. We've always been polite with each other. Parallel lines. Can we talk? He wrote. We met at a coffee shop that tries to be neutral ground for everyone: students, parents, freelancers with laptops that need outlets. Logan ordered tea and didn't add anything to it, which surprised me. He put his hands around the cup like he'd read somewhere that made you appear engaged. "I didn't know," he said without preface, eyes steady, "about the money, the extent of it." I watched his mouth when he said extent, the way it flattened like a line on a graph. He slid a folder across the table like this was a deposition. Inside were statements, a rough list of balances, a sketch of obligations. He had done the thing I had always wanted Tessa to do. He had faced the numbers without blinking. "I'm not asking you to resume anything," he said quickly when he saw my face. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry, and thank you, and that I'm course-correcting." I waited for anger in me and found none. Just relief that someone else finally held the map. "It's not my job to fix it," I said. "I know," he said. "I would like it to be my job from now on." He told me he had canceled things that felt emblematic. A trip they couldn't afford, a subscription to a designer rental service that made their photos look a certain way. He had made a spreadsheet with due dates and a calendar with reminders. He admitted quietly, moved all their autopays to his account and set a budget like a fence. He looked almost embarrassed to say the word budget in front of me, like I was the Pope and he was reciting the creed wrong. "We have to live within what we have," he said simply. I should have insisted earlier. There it was, the sentence I had wanted to hear for years, said not as an accusation or a sigh, but as a fact that respects everyone. I felt a knot loosen at the base of my skull. The next day, my grandmother called. She's 90 and has more common sense than most modern think pieces. She lives in a small bungalow with a lemon tree painted on the garage because she says you should look at something cheerful when you take out the trash. "I hear you drew a line," she said, voice crisp. "Good girl." "We don't use girl for grown women," I joked weakly. "We do when the grown woman has finally done something the family didn't expect her to do," she snapped. "Listen, when I was your age, your mother's brother convinced me to co-sign a loan for a car he couldn't afford. He promised to pay on time. He didn't. I went to the bank myself and told the man behind the window, 'Close this. I don't sign for promises anymore.' Your grandfather was furious for half a day. Then he admitted he was relieved. Your sister will be furious longer, but relief has a way of sneaking in when people run out of anger." I stood at my kitchen sink, phone on speaker, hands still in soapy water. I looked at my practical blue sponge and felt something like joy. "Thank you," I said. "You are not cruel," she said. "You are done being responsible for other people's irresponsibility. That's not the same." She hung up as if she'd delivered soup. I dried my hands and cried for 3 minutes, quietly, more from recognition than sadness. There were still messes. People who had benefited from the old version of events did not adjust overnight. One aunt sent me a paragraph about forgiveness that was really about silence. Another cousin reposted a vague quote about people who hoard money but not love. My mother called to announce that Tessa hadn't slept in 2 days, and whose fault did I think that was? I listened. I said very little. Sometimes I walked to the lakefront and stood in the wind until my brain cleared. Sometimes I baked a cake for no reason other than that a measured recipe felt like proof the world could make sense. What shifted, quietly, was my house. I bought a lamp I had wanted for a year. I replaced the couch. I increased my retirement contributions by 2%. These were small, adult acts. They felt radical. In the evenings, I stopped calculating whether I could cover someone else's emergency if it arrived and started reading books again. I tuned a playlist, watered my plants, called a friend just to talk about nothing dramatic. My life expanded back to its actual size. A month later, Logan asked if we would meet as a family. Parents, the 2 of them, me. I thought about saying no. Then I said yes, because I was not afraid of being in a room with my own boundaries. They chose a neutral spot, his and Tessa's townhouse, which looked different when I wasn't seeing it through the gauze of, "we're fine." The dining table had a stack of mail on it that had not been arranged for company. The sink had a single mug. I recognized the sight as real life, not failure. We sat. Tessa looked tired. Not curated tired, Real tired. Logan cleared his throat. "I'm going to talk," he said, and no one interrupted, which told me things had already shifted. "We have been living beyond our means," he said. "We have been buying things to look like the people we thought we were supposed to be. We are going to stop. I have moved our balances to a consolidator with a rate we can manage. We are cutting the store cards. We're selling the second car. We'll be making a payment to Naomi each month until the full amount she covered is returned." He passed me an envelope. I didn't open it. I set it on the table like it might be a seed. I looked at my sister. She stared at her hands, picked at the skin near her nail, then finally lifted her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. 2 words. They sounded small and enormous. I didn't realize. She stopped, tried again. That's not true, I realized. I just pushed the realization away because I didn't want to look at it. I thought if I kept telling a certain story, the facts would catch up. "They didn't," I said, not unkindly. "No," she said. "They didn't." We talked about simple things after that. Interest rates, schedules, automatic transfers set up from their account to mine. My parents listened like they had been told a fairy tale in a language they were learning. My mother cried, quiet tears that didn't demand an audience. My father, who had been quiet to the point of absence, cleared his throat and said, "We should have noticed sooner." He looked at me. "I should have asked you if you were okay, instead of assuming you always were." "I should have told you I wasn't," I said. We were both right and both wrong, and something in that mutual admission felt like air. You might want a dramatic confrontation here, a thundering speech, a slammed door, a cutoff. That's not what happened. What happened looked like adults making a plan. What happened looked like uncomfortable truths, spoken plainly at a table that had seen too many silent meals. What happened looked like people choosing reality over performance. The justice wasn't cinematic, it was a spreadsheet. The resolution wasn't a miracle. It was the reliability of a transfer on the first of the month, noted and appreciated, not gawked at. 6 months later, the balance line had retreated a measurable inch. I kept that envelope on a shelf and made a little note on the first business day each month. Received. I didn't send thank you texts. I didn't send reminders. I treated it like what it was, repayment, not a gift. The more significant change was not the money, but the conversations. My mother asked me over for coffee alone and told me about her own mother's habit of bailing out an uncle who always had a sure thing and never did. She said she wished someone had told her a different story about love. My father sent me an article about emergency funds like he had discovered a new continent and wanted me to move there. I had always been the fiscally responsible one. Now I was also the person who said no, when no was the correct answer. That distinction changed the shape of my face in the mirror in the mornings, softened something in my jaw I hadn't realized was clenched. On the next Thanksgiving, we gathered again. The sun in late November is stingy, but it was kind that day, unexpectedly bright across the dining room. The table was a little less crowded because people had stopped inviting extended acquaintances to prove something intangible. Tessa arrived on time, hair in a simple knot, wearing a navy dress that looked like it could be worn to work. She carried a pumpkin pie she had baked herself. It had a crack down the middle, and she apologized for it in a tone that made me like her again. We ate. We passed dishes. We didn't perform. Midway through, my grandmother asked us each to say one thing we had learned that year. She sometimes assigns tasks at meals like she's presiding over a committee. People went around. The kids said cute kid things. My dad said he had learned that bigger isn't always better when it comes to gardens. My mother said she had learned to keep only the cookbooks she actually uses. When it was Tessa's turn, she lifted her water glass like a toast and set it down again. "I learned," she said, slow and careful, "that love is not a credit line, and that when someone stops enabling you, it's not because they love you less. It might be because they love you right." No one clapped. We just breathed. That felt better than applause. After dinner, I helped her with the dishes, because muscle memory is a kind of kindness too. She washed, I dried. She didn't fill the silence with anecdotes. She let it be a quiet that belonged to both of us. "Do you remember that time I made you a collage for your 12th birthday?" she said suddenly. "And you pretended to like it even though it was truly awful?" "It wasn't awful," I said. "It was enthusiastic." "I have been enthusiastic about so many wrong things," she said, a laugh tucked into it like a folded note. "I am trying to be enthusiastic about right ones." We finished. We leaned on the counter. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked at nothing like it owned the air. She looked at me. "I'm not asking you to forget," she said. "I'm asking if we can keep going anyway." "Yes," I said. Not a grand reconciliation, not a breathless hug in a doorway. Just that. Yes. I walked home that night along streets that were cold but friendly, the way Midwestern streets get when the holidays turn on their lights. In my living room, the lamp I'd bought made that perfect pool of calm it had made every evening since I brought it home. I sat down on my new couch, soft but firm, exactly what I'd wanted but felt like too much for years, and opened my laptop not to a spreadsheet, but to a tab with a list of weekend classes at the art museum. I signed up for one about light and shadow. The confirmation email felt like permission. I know some people will hear this story and say I should have cut her off years earlier. Some will say family means enduring even when it hurts. Both can be true, depending on who you are and what you are asked to hold. For me, the truth settled here. Generosity without boundaries is not kindness. It is surrender, and I was done surrendering. If you're listening to this and wondering where your line is, here's what I learned. The right boundary will not make everyone happy. It will make you honest. It will invite other people to be honest too if they are willing. Sometimes they won't be, and then your boundary will also be a map out of a place you can't live anymore. At the end of the year, I wrote something, in my journal in small handwriting, like I didn't want to startle it. Family should be about love, not control. Love doesn't demand you set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Love asks you to stand with someone while they face what they've built, and to know when to step back so they can build differently. I turned off my lamp, stood in my quiet apartment, and realized I was not waiting for an emergency anymore. The emergency had passed. The life I had wanted, measured, generous, intact, was what remained, and that, in the end, is what I needed to learn. Money tells a story, but it doesn't have to be the story. You get to choose your narrative. You get to stop underwriting someone else's illusion. You get to be the dependable one for yourself.